on Web3 and N3 new design patterns, it's going to be a one-on-one discussion about DAOs. Again, might be surprising, but we're still talking about DAOs. So first, coming to the stage, we have John deVadoss, president of NGD Enterprise at Neo. And we have Erhan Korhaliller, general partner and founder at Matterblock and EAK Digital. EAK Digital.
Ooh, these lights are bright, huh? Thanks everyone for coming. Yeah, it's great to see so many people here. My name's Erhan. I'm the founder and CEO of EAK Digital, which is a blockchain PR and events company. We organize Istanbul Blockchain Week and Blockdown Festival. I'm also a general partner at Matterblock, which is a Web3 fund and accelerator. I'm really delighted to have John deVadoss today with us.
Thank you, Erhan. Good morning. I'm John deVadoss. I work on the developer tooling for Neo for N3. So if you like our tools, I'm the guy. If you don't like what we build, I'm the guy as well. I want feedback, please let me know. We believe we have built the best dev tools ecosystem in the industry, and certainly very proud of what we have done.
Yeah, so, obviously the DAO space is still extremely nascent. We see kind of two main styles of DAOs, investment DAOs and, contribution DAOs. And, I think right now, DAOs is particularly interesting now that we're in a bear market, especially on the contribution side, where people are earning tokens to do different tasks. I think that obviously we've seen Coinbase is not hiring the people that they promised to hire, which is we've seen Gemini get rid of 10% of their workforce, and people are able to now get more jobs and income using this new DAO system, which I think is going to become more and more prevalent, especially as we may go into some kind of recession. So I think from a future of work perspective, it's quite interesting because the pandemic really accelerated people working from home, and obviously that gives them a bit more kind of ownership of their job and their work, and then also and then now with DAOs, people are able to jump from DAO to DAO, not be locked into a labor contract which forces them to stay for a certain amount of time or do a certain amount of hours. So it's really given more sovereignty to employees, and I think that's a really interesting development to see where that's going. But John, what's your current opinion on the DAO landscape? Where are we right now?
Yeah, thank you. I want to just give you a perspective. This morning there were a couple of sessions here, and I think there were comments made as think of the DAO as the evolution of the corporation. I think that's a fair perspective. There was another interesting point which said, look, really DAOs are kind of the destination, the model that we've been pursuing for a long time, and what we have today, or over the last few centuries, has been kind of building up slowly towards the destination. For me, I'm a design patterns guy, and so what I really like as I observe this are the underlying design patterns. How do you build the DAOs? How do you evolve the DAOs? And again, from a technology and a technical perspective, but also from a commercial perspective, right? What are the component patterns? How do you compose them? DAOs are not static things, right? You don't just build one and say, I'm done. It's something that's living, it's evolving. So I'm kind of obsessed with this notion of the design patterns and how do we create the tooling on N3 to help to support people out there building DAOs and to evolve them eventually in due course.
Yeah, so I mean, Neo, as you know, you've been building tooling for products for decades now, if you don't mind me saying, and Neo is some of the best tooling for developers. Obviously, DAO tooling at the moment is again very nascent. It's not there yet in order to really get adoption of DAOs, I don't think. But how is Neo helping that come together?
That's a really good segue, and thank you for call out on Neo. I want to maybe highlight one particular DAO recently that's been built by some key developers in the community. It's called Grant Shares. Grantshares.io is the URL. As you're probably aware, Neo N3 has been very ecosystem focused over the last couple of years. There have been efforts like EcoBoost and other similar initiatives to support, to grant, and to fund community initiatives. what is very interesting about Grand Shares, for me, two things. One, the people who built it, amazingly cool developers, right? And so the design, the underlying design is something that I feel like, we can go, we can learn, and we can reuse and build on top of. And the second piece is, it's also very naturally a portal, an entry point for people to go in and apply for a grant from the ecosystem. So it's kind of, in some ways, bootstrapping and self-referential. But either way, I recommend take a look at grantshares.io in terms of how to design and build a DAO, keeping to the highest principles of software engineering.
Yeah, and that's available right now, is it?
It's out there right now. In fact, the guys, Gwil is right here. The folks who built it are right here.
Oh.
Please go check it out. It was released very recently. Really good work. And again, an exemplar on how to design and build a DAO, I believe.
Okay, cool. So yeah, everyone do that. But yeah, so then, yeah, just again, looking from a DAOs from a technical perspective, obviously this is version, 0.1 right now, what we have. DAOs have got a long way to go. How do you see them, them evolving as time goes by?
Certainly, and by the way, I would love to get your perspective as well, because you're an industry expert across multiple domains, and I want to get your thoughts as well in terms of how you see the evolution. But let me start. What is interesting for me, as a guy who spent many, many years in the AI and machine learning space, I'm particularly keen on this notion of the evolution of DAOs. There was a field called, many years ago, genetic algorithms, in terms of how do you fuse and evolve and create kind of new generations of software artifacts. And particularly, I think a lot about this notion of how do we use machine learning to be able to take the mechanics of a DAO over time. Of course, caveat the other aspects, the legal, the business, and so on, right? We are still figuring those things out for the most part. But just the core in terms of the DAO, this notion of genetic algorithms and machine learning and having micro DAOs, and how do you compose micro DAOs to kind of create macro DAOs, if you will, I think is a space we will see significant innovation and focus in the coming months and years. But now I want to hear your perspective as well.
Well, just before we do that, like obviously you use quite a lot, terms there, like using genetic and and AI and everything. So could you just give an example of what that might look like, just for people that don't have that technical understanding?
Certainly, yeah. I'll give you. Thank you. Just a quick synopsis. The idea of machine learning, which you're all very familiar with, but this notion of genetic algorithms is a theme from the early 90s in terms of how do you evolve code with minimal, if you will, human interaction. And the system is designed with intrinsic constraints and enablers. And you can have kind of, think of it as parents and children, if you will, and so on, where you're able to combine the best and maybe the worst sometimes of both sides to create the next generation and the next and so on. So to me, the mental model of DAOs as we see today, very primitive, I believe, and I apologize for being very candid, very primitive, I believe. However, we can all see the potential. And so to realize the potential, I believe we have to look at other similar fields and say, this has to be an evolution mechanism. Now, whether it is machine learning, maybe not, I don't know. But I want to just plant these seeds for you to think about, not as human, directed or human, sort of mechanized, but really self-driven, autonomous, if you will, organisms. So ping me offline. Happy to share my thoughts if you like. A topic very close to my heart, in fact, and we're also working on, again, similar developer tooling to support DAO builders out there, not just to build, but also, again, like I said, to take it forward, right, to evolve here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, John, you see things from a technical standpoint. I see things more from a marketing and events standpoint. I'm quite interested to incorporate potentially like a DAO into some of the events that I organize. So it's decentralized way for people to vote and govern of what they actually want to see on stage, rather than just one or two people behind thinking that we're just making up what people want to see. I think that way it would be a lot fairer to put together an agenda and make an event for the people, which I think is great. And then, from a sports perspective, I'm a big sports fan as well, John. I think you are as well.
I am.
I'm obviously English, you can tell by my accent, and our Premier League teams right now, they're all, not a lot, some of them are owned by, oligarchs and, people that are purely in it for profit, don't care about the teams. I really would love to see a DAOs in some of the biggest sports teams. I'm a big Manchester United fan, for example, and we have our issues with our owners right now, and I'm a big supporter. Our fans, really, if we were owning the club from a DAO, it would look after the club. After all, the whole club is based on the community and the fans and the memories, and I think that's a perfect marriage of DAOs that I would love to see. Maybe that's a romantic, way of looking at it, but hopefully one day, we can see some more sports teams do that.
Absolutely. In fact, and again, at the risk of offending other fans, and I'm a big Packers fan. The Packers here in the U.S. have had this model for a very long time of being owned and run by the fans themselves. So this is long before DAOs, right? And so for me, again, there's a natural fit, like you said, Erhan, of sports teams, franchises being able to truly, because it's the fans who make the club happen, right? So being able to bring the fans in, and again, designing probably the next wave of DAOs, I believe is inevitable, yeah?
100%. So obviously, it's going back to Neo, obviously, you guys recently launched Neo 3,
yes.
And it's been a big focus, and Neo is a blockchain, it has its own inbuilt oracle, it's quite unique to some of the other blockchains out there.
Yes.
What's kind of your focus area now with Neo 3? What does it enable builders to do?
Thank you. So I want to go back again, a few years ago, earlier, when Neo was designed at the beginning, and what really motivated me to work on and build the tools for Neo was this thesis that assets will be digitized, of course, right? And looking back today, it seems kind of obvious, yeah, of course. But we've seen over the last couple of years, gaming, for example, right? And we're seeing more and more asset-backed coins, in those domains, especially the evolution. And I look at DAOs very similarly in terms of, again, the transformation of assets from what you might call today, suppose in real life, to tomorrow. So we are particularly focused, I would say maybe even obsessed with the notion of developers and helping developers to be able to build what they dream very quickly. For example, again, not to tout, but you could pick our toolkit and in about 3, 4, 5 minutes, build a smart contract, test it, debug it, deploy it, right? And our intention is to take this forward with the Grant Shares initiative and other similar efforts to provide similar syntactic sugar as well as underlying framework support for developers to be able to quickly, easily build, test, deploy, and evolve DAOs. Because I believe certainly that the notion of decentralized organizations, whether it's DAOs in the current incarnation or perhaps something else, is inevitable. This is happening whether we like it or not. And the question is, do you want to be on this train? And if you do, then now is the time to begin to experiment and to play with it.
And which industries do you think will be the first ones? I suppose like venture capital has already been disrupted, with the investment DAOs. But which industries do you think would be disrupted first?
So to your first point earlier, about 20 minutes ago, you talked about the current kind of wave and people and work, the nature of work, right? I certainly want to believe that the notion of an individual being tied to a corporation or an entity to work, I believe, will disappear, that it'll be loosely coupled, whatever you want to call them, but loosely coupled structures where people are able to do multiple things. You don't have to be, this notion that I work for company X and therefore I cannot do B or C or D, I think it's just passé. It's just, it's a serfdom, artifact in my opinion. So this notion of loosely coupled new world of work, if you will fundamentally replace everything we have today. And I think potentially what might be, shall we dare say, a bear market might be a catalyst to help us get there.
Mm-hmm. So what about the security models of DAOs? I think there's a famous, the first DAO was in 2016. I think they had a hack. I read about it earlier. How do we, especially if we're talking about people's salaries, people working, people earning tokens, like obviously it's pretty important that the security layer is clean. How from a technical standpoint, like how is that currently?
That's a really good question. So in fact, this is something we didn't discuss. We're talking backstage about what should we talk about. This is a very interesting point Erhan makes. The way I see it is, it's very simple, right? To be secure, you want to have less surface area, which means less code, less design, less time involved in the preparation and deployment, less of everything. Because when you have more surface area, you open it up to risk, right? And so the first thing I would say is, from a tooling and a platform perspective, any tooling ecosystem, like of course N3, that minimizes the surface area for you, where the frameworks are able to move up the stack and the work on the part of the developer is less and less, is certainly the direction to go with respect to security. And I don't want to say it's the only thing. Of course, we have to worry about threat models, right? How, when you design something, especially a DAO, you have to have a pretty robust threat model. So what is a threat model? You think about all the vectors in terms of protagonist, possible avenues of attack, and you say, okay, for each of these vectors, let's understand first and then analyze what are the variables. Then how do you minimize each of those variables across those various vectors, right? So that's something, obviously I would assume you do, and if you haven't, I strongly advise you, especially as Erhan says, in the DAO space, because we are in kind of new territory here, right? So two things: surface area, minimize it, and second, ensure that you have a very robust threat model, or even multiple threat models would be my strong advice.
Yeah. So how early do you think we are with DAOs? Like where are we with DAOs right now?
I'll give you a perspective. I want to hear your perspective as well, right? Okay. I see it as really very early, very nascent in my perspective, right? That's the good thing. And why is it good? Because we can experiment. Nobody's telling us the DAO has to be like this, which we don't want, right? We're going to learn, we're going to experiment, and we will shape what the DAOs of tomorrow look like. That is what we have as the opportunity. So I see it really as sort of a two-sided coin, right? It's very early, but that is the opportunity, because I don't want to say, somebody up there will tell me what a DAO should look like, right? No. We, us, you, me together, we will define what this tomorrow looks like for a DAO across the technology as well as the commercial dimensions. But what do you think?
It's beyond early. It's was it that 56K modem router? I think we're about that stage. Like you said, it's a great opportunity for people to collaborate, to get involved, especially with Grant Shares DAO and Neo3 to kind of build the future of DAOs. What do we want it to look like? It's kind of up to all of us really, and how we, how we integrate and use DAOs. So it's going to be fascinating, isn't it?
Absolutely. What a time to be alive, right? Yeah. I want to go back to your point, right? So again, if you're thinking about building a DAO, if you're maybe in the process of building one, do take a look at grantshares.io, reuse the code if you will. And at the same time, if you want to sign up or make a proposal for a grant from the N3 EcoBoost, it's the same mechanism anyway, so you get kind of two birds in one stone. So give it a spin. I know we have a couple of minutes. So if there's any maybe questions or anything anybody wants to, happy to open it up.
I think there's someone over there
yes.
with a hand up. Yeah.
So when you're talking about design patterns, are you talking about, are you using that term kind of informally, or are we talking about more formalized design patterns? And if so, have we formalized these, or are you in the middle of that?
So thank you. That's a wonderful question. I'm really happy you asked the question. Yes, I do mean this in the formal sense. And why do I say this? Because as we mature this space, the underlying patterns will have code instantiations, and there'll be libraries that we can reuse. That can only happen. We can reify the patterns only if they are formal. That's my position. But to your second point, where are we in this process? Again, very early. It's something I'm driving with a few colleagues and friends. If you have an interest, I would love to partner with you. But I believe it's inevitable. We've seen this before in terms of cloud design patterns, services and earlier waves of computing era. So it's inevitable, but if we can make these, build this together, so please ping me offline. I would love to connect with you.
I think we have time for one more question.
Maybe a few seconds, yeah, anything else?
Anyone else? I think there's a hand over there.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Again, a wonderful question. The question was the intersection of machine learning and DAOs, right? So if we decouple, or at least asymptotically decouple the human aspects from a DAO, then for me, the evolution of the DAO has to be a self-governing, autonomous, if you will, mechanism. And that's why this ideas of machine learning, in particular around genetic algorithm I referred earlier, right, where we can see sort of DAOs, micro DAOs, composition of DAOs, perhaps pairing of DAOs, and then you have a resulting kind of child DAO, right? This is still very early, but we can already see these discussions happening. People talking about how do we merge them, how do you unify them, how do you have this conjunct or conflation, and what does the resulting child DAO look like, right? So that's why I believe we will see significant work. And today, these fields are somewhat kind of divergent. I don't think we have too many machine learning people in the DAO space, and certainly we don't have DAO people in the machine learning space, right? And that is also for us opportunity to be able to discover and say, okay, look, let's see where this intersection goes. Once again, I would love to follow up offline. Please ping me. I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, the whole deal, so would love to follow up and discuss more. So thank you.
Cool. Well, look, I think we're out of time.
Yeah.
So you can find John at the Neo booth, and we'll probably just be backstage coming out here. So if anyone has any questions for either of us, we'd be happy to talk to you outside. But thanks so much for coming to our session, and enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you very much. Thank you.